we understand the process. I was very fortunate to be extremely exposed to the regulatory framework in Europe. And as I also worked on the product management side in Fintech before as well, I knew also what technology could do. So I was like, there are no excuses for a poor mortgage experience. There is like, if you think about it, this problem is actually very solvable and we can do it. And I think that mindset, that grit, that audacity, look, no excuses. We will learn along the way, but we can develop a process and technology that actually can turn smiles on people's faces, or at least doesn't make them as anxious as they are today. So we're tackling the home buying process and especially acquiring the mortgage. And we basically want to reduce borrower anxiety and the amount of paper and manual tasks in the process from the first time you think about financing a property up until signing your contract.
Hi, Geert. It is an absolute pleasure having you in the show. Thank you.
Likewise, it's good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so basically, this podcast is all about how can we build more purpose-driven fintechs. So what is your take? How can we do?
I've been in the fintech game for quite a long time. And I think inherently when fintech popped up for the first time as a name, like combination of financial technology, I think it was all about the purpose of disrupting the existing financial services scheme, because there was a lot of issues with transparency or clogged up processes. People didn't really trust their house banks anymore. So I feel when it's fintech arised in that first real wave of B2C fintech, which then later evolved more to B2B fintech, I think the purpose was really to build services that were much more convenient, much more transparent, and basically just generate overall better financial services from people that need to execute payments between two countries to ultimately people transacting alone. And so for me, like putting the user at the center, putting that purpose at the center, for me is actually what fintech should be all about.
Definitely. Yes. So tell us more about you. What was your purpose? What is your purpose?
What is my purpose? What do I think about when I wake up every day? No, for me, I have been on this beautiful borderline of banking and technology for basically all my career. And to be honest, I rolled into it. It wasn't my dream to be in fintech when I was 12 years old. I had other dreams and aspirations then, but I love building stuff. I've always been energized by building things. And when I got into the domain and when I experienced it myself, buying a house, wanting to own a property and wanting to have your own house and then needing to buying it, then getting it financed. That's a journey which I've been through it myself a few times in different occasions of my life. And I've always thought that it's an incredibly intense experience. And I know that, it creates a lot of borrower anxiety. Also for a lender, for a loan advisor, it's also always a complex journey. It really touches people's lives. And I felt that there, using digital technologies, we could do so much more than we were doing today. And I had the feeling nobody was really doing it. And I myself was making 1,000 PowerPoint slides as a consultant on how to do it, but I wasn't really making the change. And that's, I think, when my purpose changed from telling people what to do to doing it myself. And that was a little bit the genesis of Oper, to really make sure that people hadn't to go through the experience that I and my co-founders went through.
I love that. And now that you have Oper, like back then when you started, what was your hypothesis? What made you think that you could actually win?
I had the feeling that we had I think the mindset was crucial here. And the mindset was like, look, we understand how the process is because we've worked with banks. And my co-founder worked extensively with banks before. Through a project, I was very fortunate to be extremely exposed to the regulatory framework in Europe. So by then I knew the regulatory framework. And as I also worked on the product management side in fintech before as well, I knew also what technology could do. So I was like, there are no excuses for a poor mortgage experience. There is like, if you think about it, this problem is actually very solvable, and we can do it. And I think that mindset, that grit, that audacity, we had from the start to say, look, no excuses. We will learn along the way, but we can develop a process and technology that actually can turn smiles on people's faces, or at least doesn't make them as anxious as they are today when you think about it.
I like that because you were like, hey, exactly, there's nothing stopping us. There's no excuses. Like you've got the knowledge, the technology, the problem is there. And since the beginning, you acknowledged, like, we'll learn, which is key.
Exactly. That's really the mindset we've always had. It's not always easy because we, at a certain point in time, also decided not to go B2C, but to go B2B. So to not develop our own mortgage offering, but offer it to banks because we felt we could make more impact there. But of course, then we are continuously fighting with these constraints heads on. So there's not a week that passes by with getting exact excuse, but it doesn't bog us down.
So I want to build on that because you're totally right. It's the mindset. As a founder, what are your ways of working that you may say, hey, people from the outside, they think this is eccentric, this may be wrong, this may be different, but they work for you as a founder of a fintech?
Wow, it's a great question. Well, I think on the outside, what people never see is that people think that your story is linear, but it isn't. So it means that you have to cope with every week. For every win, you'll probably have a setback, or for every 2 wins, you'll probably have a setback, depending. So I really regard building a business as a computer game. And I've never had that in my professional life. But for me, every Monday, a new level starts. And the thing you try to do by Friday is to play it out and go to the next level. But in the next level, and as a kid, I played a lot of computer games. In the next level, there will be a more hairy monster. There will be a more hairy trap. The secret room will even be more hard to find. That's like my belief. And in the beginning, I had a year, I think, where every Sunday evening something went wrong. Like from a personal employee losing a work permit to a client sending a super shit mail. But it was like the Sunday evening, I could guess it, between 4 and 7, I would get the email, or I would get the Slack message or the WhatsApp message. And in the beginning, it just ruins your Sunday night. But now I'm like, okay, I get some Alice. Yeah. And by Tuesday, this won't be an issue anymore.
Oh, good point.
And, you just start having fun with a combination of setbacks and wins. And then sometimes you need to look back and enjoy the view because you're always making progress if you have that mindset.
I love that mindset. That's a really good mindset. And coming back to impact, like industry wise, I think, like you say, fintech as such, it started with a very purposeful purpose. But this was like roughly 10 years ago or so. And then, since then, I think as an industry, we've had a ton of impact. However, the problem statement keeps growing as well. The mindset change that I'm trying to figure out, that could love your opinion on, is how can we have 10 times more impact in the next 5 years' time? What do we need to change?
I'm going to give maybe a more unconventional answer here. I think we need to wait also sometimes a little bit for everything that is happening. My answer is different there. My first intuitive response is also we always underestimate what we can do in the long run, and we overestimate what's going to happen the next year. There are a lot of companies, we're only like 10 years in this journey. And we now see that there are some B2C fintechs that are tremendously making an impact. I think if you look at where, for example, the Revolut is today, like the default option worldwide, it's the default option not to pay ATM fees or to wire money cheaply to South America, etc. Where before that, we only had Western Union. So in that, and again, that's like an economical, very incredible impact that has been made. And I think there are like so much more technologies that we are developing that will make an impact over time. I think firstly, we need to be patient. And secondly, because there's a lot more to come. So much companies are still in their early days of what they're doing and the impact they can make. I think that is one. And two, it's just, I think we've been on a very good trajectory into funding businesses, making entrepreneurship a path that is not just a US career path, but can be a global career path. So I feel that if we can allocate capital, not only to a hub like Silicon Valley, but as we operating in Europe, but also in Africa, also also Asia, everywhere, I think we'll see an incredible growth sprint in more platforms. And then we again need to give it time. And we'll see some pretty amazing stuff.
And then let's say that we give it time, we see the results. How do we know that we got there? E.g., how do we measure that impact?
Oh, I think it's a great question. I can give so much sophisticated answers to that, but I think we'll know. Because for me, it's a bit like looking back at how did this happen 5 to 10 years ago and how are we doing it now? And I think I hope there'll be progress in there and no regression.
Oh, that's a good point. Just as long as it's, progress, no regression. That's like a very good point. So if we talk about, I think the way in which we materialize impact at the end of the day, it's by building these fintechs, these companies, but also by building products, right? So what's your definition of a great product?
The big one. Product you need to distinguish. I think something we use internally a lot is that if you look at the definition of a product is it's something replicable, which you can basically commercialize and then you can sell it many times. Now we come to our world and technology pro. And so we chose the B2B route. So meaning we sell our technology into banks. That makes us as a product very different. Our product is very different than if we would say, hey, we start a lender, we start our own bank, we take a banking license and we'll lend ourselves. Makes us very different from an Evernote, a Notion, a Slack. So if you ask me, what is the definition of a great product, meaning like Oper, selling white label technology into banks, for me, it is that economically for them, it is an absolute no-brainer to deploy our solution because we can help their borrowers, help their loan advisors, help their credit officers in a way that their own IT developments could never do, and do that at a no-brainer cost. Let's say, for me, a good meeting is a meeting where we demo our product and the reaction of the other side is, oh boy, we would love to have this. And if we would have to build this ourselves, we would need a decade with floor in the build. That's how we develop product and make it also at the same time easy to install, because if you then sign the contract, we also don't want them to spend 10 years in implementing it. So it should be very easy to put into the existing architecture, to work and speak with other systems. That's for me today, the first, primary value driver, how I define great product. And what comes out of that is, of course, the fact that we extensively work with borrowers. So our product already powers more than a dozen banks across Europe. So we know how borrowers behave in the journey. We know how loan advisors, what their weaknesses are. So then the secondary layer for me is really just to make sure that out of the box, we just have, the best experience. And we always stay on top by the lead. So it's not like we build it once. No, it continuously evolves into being at par with what borrowers expect.
Yes, I love your definition because as you were speaking, it's like the moment when you said, oh boy, this solution really solves our problem and it would take us 10 years to build it. That's like a very genuine, like you tapped into a genuine customer pain point and you're solving it in a way that they couldn't be able to do it before. That's a beautiful analogy. Thank you. So building on Oper, what is the problem statement that you're solving?
We are tackling one of, as I said already, the intro. So we're tackling the home buying process and especially acquiring the mortgage. And we basically want to reduce borrower anxiety and the amount of paper and manual tasks in the process from, let's say, the first contact, first time you think about financing a property up until signing your contract. That's really the problem statement we're tackling, and really focused around borrower anxiety, decrease, and reduction of paper and manual tasks.
And I think like you very clearly define two things, right? Like the borrowers, e.g. people, and then the banks as such. So let me
Yep.
deconstruct that a little bit further. What are the pain points of the banks, your direct customers as such?
Yeah. First problem I already stated in the discussion we had earlier is that by building technology costs a lot of resources, and they don't always have the resources. So a first problem is, especially mid-sized banks are really struggling to bring technology alive quickly and iterate. I think that's a technology issue. A second issue is today that's more a principle, is that what a bank and of course also a regulator wants is that, they want to give loans to people that will be able to pay back for the loans. They try to mitigate risk. But at the same time, and I love this about especially mid-sized banks, talking about purpose, they of course also want to serve their community and their client base. So in a sense, they also want to provide good services. They want to help them think through what is the most feasible for my client. So marrying those two, on one hand, reducing risk, but also providing solutions to a community, and then also providing that into a great experience is challenging. Why is it challenging? So the technology part, I already explained, so it's difficult to bring technology alive. But the second problem is also the loan advisor has become a very scarce profession. Banks have been digitalizing, so there are less loan advisors need to be trained. And we do a lot of mystery shopping. It is a true mortgage expert, somebody that can truly tell you, hey, Monica, this is your situation, this is how we can help you, etc. It is extremely rare. And the only option is to find more, but not a lot of people want to be mortgage experts anymore, unfortunately, or to start using technology to help the loan advisors. So I think that's the second one. And I'm sorry, the third one, I take a lot of problems here. I'm sorry for that. But
Yes.
third one is then, of course, that because of mitigating that risk, there is so much paper, there's so much data points that need to be collected by somebody sitting somewhere in an office, somewhere in a headquarters, or somewhere in a service center, that then has to verify, I get 8 salary slips, but why did the loan advisor offer this product? It doesn't match. And then it goes back. And then you have the typical ping pong tennis game. I play it back to the advisor doesn't really understand why, plays it back to the borrower. The borrower, oh no, I'm not going to be able to get the loan. And you get this super emotional administrative journey that goes back and forth. And with one cloud solution, we try to solve all these problems, because it all leads back to a data and a document problem. And again, it's not that hard to solve, but it has very hard emotional consequences.
Yes. And I love that you bring the emotional consequences to the picture since the beginning, right? Why do you talk about borrower anxiety? What do you refer to?
For me, it's actually funny because my co-founder is going through a mortgage process now. I think, it's life therapy, because he brings it to the team. We can help him think it through. Because it's funny, he's 10 years of a mortgage expert. He knows he's respected by a few very nice brands. Thanks, call him to help. And yet he's going through his own mortgage process and he's stressed like hell. Am I going to be able to sell my property? Is the project that I'm going to close? Am I going to be able to afford this? What's going to be the impact in 5 years? We're of course in a startup. There is some uncertainty. Is that uncertainty relating to the project? Then the bank comes with an inconclusive answer. And that's for me borrower anxiety. Borrower anxiety is about, you already want to be decorating the house. You already see your home office. You already see your bedroom. You're already going to the website of IKEA or a more fancy designer site, depending on your personal income. But you're not sure yet. And that's borrower anxiety. And it is it is incredibly powerful. And it's also for us, the reason why we don't believe that people, or at least 95% of people globally, will just close a mortgage fully online without ever speaking to a human being, because it is just too much of an action, too much of a complex transaction to do.
Of course. Yeah, because then it's yeah, you're just like the way that you described it, it's like you just upload the documents and it's like you leave it to almost luck and the magic powers of the bank to decide if it's a yes
Yeah,
or a no, and you have zero control. And then it's a
exactly.
pain. Yeah.
Exactly. And it works in the refinancing journey where you're just refinancing your existing property. You're not redecorating your bedroom at that point in time. You've already done it. So it becomes a very financial, it's like buying a stock. You're just doing an additional transaction. So there, I'm very bullish that will become 100% digitized. And we also solve for that. But your first or your second property, buying a property together with your girlfriend, boyfriend, who both lives, you need to get some reassurance.
Yes. And I think you just raised a very good point about digitization. Why do you think like mortgages like have been like one of the last products to be fully digitized?
I think it is a complex process. And I think because it is complex, if you need to cut through and you go from simple to more complex, mortgages would always go last. So I think that is one of the reasons. The mistake that I think that a few lenders out there made was to argue like, yeah, personal touch is important. So why digitize? And that's, I think, where we make the difference. It's not because a human in the loop can be really important, that it then also means that I need to come to your branch, bring 25 documents. We're going to read them out loud together. And it needs to be a clunky experience, right? I think that a reason complexity and the human in the loop, I think, have slowed us down. Also, of course, regulations, that now interest rates increased again. So the macro environment wasn't ideal, especially in the US. It was really bad. I think those are the reasons. I feel we're entering a renaissance moment in the last year, to be fair. So I feel that everybody's picking the topic up again.
Why do you think it's like the renaissance moment now?
A lot of implementation, a lot of the other products have been digitized. And I think we enter a much more volatile rate climate right now. So I think the fact that you need to have some resilience in your costs, also making sure that you need lean operations as well they don't have that much loan advisors anymore. So they need to serve more clients, but also on their back office, there's a lot of opportunity. I feel a lot of projects are being launched right now in this regard to investigate more, or at least in mortgage operations, I would say.
Interesting. And then at some point, you've been talking about, let's say, the human approach and then, of course, the tech side. And then I think like one of the things that differentiates you is that you talk about a hybrid model where you're using AI and human. It's not just AI. Can you tell us a little bit more about this approach?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, the hybrid approach is the fact that a borrower should be able to do as much online as they feel comfortable doing, but should always be able to fall back on a human to speak to somebody. I think that's our whole hybrid approach. And again, if you go through it, that's also what we see in our data. Clients going through a refinancing process will rarely click the help button or will book a call. They'll just go through it, good interest rate, and off we go. First time home buyers, they fumble into the advisory approach quite quick. Now, where does AI, or to say Gen AI, come in the spot? For us, last year, we spent a lot of R&D capacity into helping the loan advisor. It was actually, and that was actually before we started implementing AI already, we actually started seeing that loan advisors play a crucial role. And our first assumption was we tried to make everything so clear in the borrower facing tooling so they never have to ask a human, but they would do that anyway. So you would have a very rich user interface and then they would still go, hey, Monica, can you help me? I forgot to say, I still have a flag. I didn't put it in the user interface. So they enter into an advisory tooling. So we really built an advisory tooling to be something that can be shared in a virtual call. And it basically talks through the life situation of the client and really comforts them in getting all the options. Etc. But then we bumped into a second problem, which is that loan advisors also are not fully aware of what can the bank offer, what are all the products that are possible. And at the same time, we saw that a lot of people came in with quite complex renovations or sometimes barely got the threshold to fund. So we saw that all our clients were launching huge training programs on their loan advice. And that's where we launched one of our first Gen AI prototypes, was that we basically had an assistant, a digital assistant for the loan advisor to basically help them in their advisory process by saying, hey, have you thought about this product? Hey, have you thought about this? This is the way you can explain it. That was one part. And the second part we also launched was that when there would be virtual conversations, we would basically summarize the conversation in a Q&A and then play that Q&A back to the borrower. So that was, let's say, a first large set of use cases that we launched in the hybrid experience to make sure that we actually alleviate that borrower anxiety we earlier discussed.
Basically, to play back in these use cases, let's say the summary, then I'm assuming the agent, not the agent, the loan, how did you call the person that does
Loan advisor.
Loan advisor, sorry.
Oh, the borrower.
Kind of moment. The loan advisor. So I'm assuming in these use cases, the loan advisor is basically interacting with the customer. Is it like on the phone or is it like chatting?
No, it's in a virtual environment. So it's a Teams call or WebEx or they're using.
Okay. And then basically, exactly, you have the customer, but then the co-pilot that you are talking about, it's basically the co-pilot of the loan advisor, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then the loan advisor reads whatever co-pilot suggested.
I hope, reads, yes. And then I hope they process it into the conversation. And then when clients have it enabled, we record the conversation. And in the end, the loan advisor again gets, okay, you talked to borrower X, you talked about the affordability that. And when they approve, this goes back to the borrower as some sort of a transcript, an edited transcript of what they discussed. And that's something we also learned is that so many people forget to take notes when they talk to their loan advisor. And then they come home and then maybe they have to explain to their husband or their wife, like, how did they go? And they completely tell a different thing. And they always have this PDF with numbers and they don't know what the numbers mean anymore.
Yes. It's happened the same to me, even with insurance. You're like, oh, like you try to read your notes and you don't understand what you wrote. And you have a ton of questions, even though you asked a lot of questions.
Exactly. And that with the Q&A thing, we try to help there to provide a much better understanding of the project.
Are you using AI for the other side, the collection side?
Yeah. That's something that's live now. That's more on the credit analyst and also the loan advisor, depending a bit on the process, where we basically, a client uploads a certain set of documents and we match that to the loan application file. Meaning that you get 3 salary slips in, you get a document of the property, et cetera. And then we try to see, okay, is there consistency? And then play it also back to the credit officer and the loan advisor to, again, if it's for the loan advisor, help them think through the conversation. Hey, is this going to make sense? Is this property making sense, et cetera? And ultimately the credit officer or the loan officer in the background to help them underwrite. And this is we made this model country agnostic and also template agnostic. So we're actually very flexible into deploying the solution across the board.
Cool. And then it looks like you've identified multiple use cases for AI. That's super cool. Congrats. For any of the teams in fintechs who are just getting started in building AI features, AI-enabled features, what are your key takeaways? As in, what are the things that we need to think about in a different manner than just building what we currently do with APIs? let's say?
Yeah, so I'm going to give the B2B answer. Probably in
Yeah.
B2C, it is. I'm, I am. I think there's three things. A is, of course, building the prompts and making sure that the prompts are not hallucinating and they also keep a human in the loop. So I think it's all about prompt engineering. I would just read up on it, and there's so much documentation out there right now. You didn't have this luxury 10 years ago to learn about technology in such a way. So I think quite quickly you can get up to speed and see how will our development or our engineering paradigm change through the foundation model. So I think that's one. As soon as you start we also had that a year ago. As soon as you start launching experiments, you get to results extremely fast. So if you read the documentation and you start playing around, probably you'll walk into a room and be like, this is amazing. But then comes, I think, the next challenge. And okay, how can you deploy something live? And then again, we come into building against hallucinations, making sure the model is accurate when the model doesn't know saying. So that's then you properly start making it into a live system. And then two other challenges that I see is regulatory and compliance. Especially if you're working as us for banks. I think 30 to 40% of our workload is into de-risking Gen AI for our clients. So how do we make sure that if the models don't get trained on client data, where is the data stored? How do we run it in our own cloud instance? How do we make sure that a lot of stuff that comes in there, and also with the EU data, we are on the verge of high risk applications, medium defensible. Certain of our use cases are going more into the risk categories. Okay, how would you do a conformity assessment and make sure it doesn't have biases, et cetera, et cetera. The still challenge is, okay, embedding it into your own software. And something that I see now, especially in the B2B segment, there is a lot of cowboy. I really call it a bit the Wild West, because you have in every client that we have plenty of consultants walking around and they do amazing experiments. But then my question is always, but how is it going to fit the existing workflow? You have a old legacy system. How is it going to communicate with this wonderful thing? And then the answer is API. That yeah, but the legacy thing doesn't speak API yet. And that's why we take a vertically integrated. Okay, we are, of course, we're not a legacy player. We're cloud native, but that's why we took a vertically integrated approach, because if you work with Oper, it's all available with a tick of the and we can just enable it anytime. So that's a bit why I'm quite bullish on vertical AI. But you need to get compliance right, and you need to make sure that your models speak the right context, and that's where the work is.
Expand on what is vertical AI, because the language that we use is super important so that everyone understands.
Yeah, maybe I'm using the definitions that I read out there. So if it's not aligned with other people's definitions, please correct me. You know how you can find me probably after this podcast somewhere online. But for me, vertical AI in an Oper context means that we will enable features that will use foundation models, but on top of that, we'll be able to speak the specific mortgage context or a specific context that we need to resolve a certain question. So how we are approaching it is that you will not be typing a question in Oper in a chat box. We will be modeling those questions in the background, and our user interface will enable it. It's a bit like your autopilot. For me, it's a bit the same like an autopilot or a co-pilot in a car. You're still turning the steering wheel. You're still playing with your classical things on the dashboard. But in the background, there are thousands of algorithms monitoring what you're doing and giving you the input. Okay, this car is coming really close. I would brake him out, giving a noise. That's a bit for me what vertical AI is about. It's about fully integrating it. But our user interface will look exactly the same. It will just behave in a different way because there will be some intelligence behind it.
I like that distinction, because then, and the analogy is perfect. Exactly like in the car, it's the same dashboard, but behind there's all these algorithms. This is like a beautiful analogy. Like you said, like in the car, like you see the same dashboard, but behind it, there's a ton of algorithms. So same when we say it's an AI enabled product, let's say, especially B2B. I like that you made reference to the user interface will continue to be the same, but behind there's like all this power behind it. And that is something for us to be aware to manage people's expectations. It's not like everything, both front end and back end, are going to change like drastically. It may be that we'll do it.
100%. 100%. That's why to be honest, we'll probably at a certain point in time have some sort of a chat box for loan advice. But actually, the last months we were very much against chatbots because everybody's asking us, when do we have a Gen AI chatbot? But for me, if you look at our roadmap of use cases, the user interface will look exactly the same, but will do so much more impactful things. Back in the days, you had an upload functionality and we had some classification stuff, etc. But now a borrower will upload documents and immediately we will tell to a loan advisor, hey, by the way, Monica's income in the third month was a bit unstable. And there's also a bonus payment of which we're asking ourselves question. This is something you need to look into. That's for me super powerful, but the way it's presented is really the same as it used to be. But the power of the intelligence is crazy. And again, this is one use case. And my idea is really to launch. It should be everywhere, meaning that we'll really supercharge the software.
And then as you talk about the use cases and you use the word use case roadmap, I'm assuming, I'm trying to be like imagining in your office, like with a team, as you think about this, I'm assuming you have like your user journeys and you've mapped these. And the way in which you come up with AI enabled use cases, it's basically you just challenge yourselves and your thinking as you go through the journey. Ooh, how can we use AI here? Is that how you guys did it, or did you do it another way?
Well, so now it's exactly at a certain point in time, we just took all the problem statements we are working on and then more detailed, right? And I always ask all the question, can we use LLMs for this? And sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no. But we have a lot of people that have been working on this problem now for quite some time. And so as soon as we had this little team that started launching the first AI prototypes, and then we made an Gen AI architecture, etc. And as soon as we discussed it with the whole team at all hands, it was a no-brainer for a few people because suddenly it was like, oh, we can do this, we could accelerate that. If we do this, we don't have to work with a third-party provider anymore. This we could do better. Things now it's more about getting them live, actually. It's more about building them one by one. Yeah.
I like it. You have a very nice challenge. Just capacity, right?
Funny. There is a Notion page about it. And it's very important what the first sentence on the Notion page. First sentence is, of course, who wrote it and who owns the page. Second sentence is very important. Is like, we're not going to use AI should be used to solve a problem. We're not just going to deploy AI because of AI. So very important is that, and you also see when you read down the page, is like all the use cases, they always start with, I know now, for example, one is giving clients good advice around renovations. Renovating property is a pain in the ass. Pardon my French. So the question is, how are we going to solve that? And then how can we leverage LLMs to do so? And then you get like the more which model we're going to use, how it's going to work, etc.
Awesome. This has been an amazing conversation. And I want to go a little bit deeper into your ways of thinking as a founder, like not even as a founder and as Geert, as a person, as a professional. So it's a little bit of a fireside question. So I want to start with, what is your approach to creating a winning strategy?
My approach is, first and for all, you need to be extremely audacious. In my opinion, you need to combine ambition with actions, and you always need to live 20 to 30% out of what you think is realistic. Maybe as a founder, 20 is enough. Otherwise, you'll get disillusional. I think you need resilience because the default standard is a no, so you'll need to turn it into a yes. but you need to accept that you'll get 100 to 200 to 10,000 no's, and you'll get that at any stage of your business. It doesn't get easier than that. And you need to do it together with other people. For me, it is about assembling a team, assembling people who you can work hard with, but also can have a lot of fun with. Again, at every stage in the company, you'll have to gather the right people. And that's, as a founder, and that's the resilience part. You often get frustrated because things never go the way you really want them to go. But it's your job to bring the right people together and to make sure that it gets done.
Awesome. And then what are the things that have worked really well for you when it comes to building products?
Oh, it's again an answer. It's a fireside chat, so I should be really quick. But I could basically dedicate 6 hours to this one.
Use the 6 hours.
I mean, yeah, use the 6 hours. That's worked really well for us. Ship as fast as you can, and just make sure you iterate as fast as you can with clients. Have just domain. Make sure you bring in the right domain expertise. I am all for first principle thinking. I think it's really cool, but it becomes a bit it becomes sometimes a bit of a gimmick. Let's talk about mortgage regulations is mortgage regulations. So you should just understand, ship, test. If it works, great, iterate. If it not, goes back. You shouldn't go back to a whiteboard to think that through.
It's the practical approach. Then changing from tech and product to people, how do you bring the best out of people and create a high performance culture?
Again, that's another book, second chapter of the book or second series of the book. Yeah, you need to, I feel you need to, I'm a firm believer in diversity. So hire people different as you, and it is really hard. And then make sure all your people are continuously between 10 to 20% out of their comfort zone. That's for me. And have an environment where people can fail and are open to learn, from it. So for me, building it as diverse. Originally, we're a Belgian company. We are today 40 people. There are only 2 Belgians working at Oper. So I value diversity and cultural mix. The 2 founders, exactly. I really value that. I think then just continuously creating an environment where people can grow. And I feel you really grow when you're always a little bit out of your comfort zone.
Cool. And then being out of comfort zone and entrepreneurship and being a founder comes with failure. What are your biggest lessons on failure?
My biggest lessons on failure. I think it's a tough one. I think I have a lot of favorite failures. Yeah, again, that's another podcast there. I feel from completely ignoring the common wisdoms of hiring to not having doubts, but not taking decisions, to thinking you should prioritize on other stuff and leave things lingering. I think if you go really fast, there's a lot that goes wrong. If you surround yourself, I think it's important as a founder to surround yourself with people that will also tell you when they think you're completely off. And I think that's the most important thing. I think I'm a personality trait is that I'm somebody who is, I think I'm really hard for myself. So I think I am very good at acknowledging what I did wrong. But I think I need people, and that's also when I surround myself with people that sometimes call me and say, I think you're making a really big mistake, or I think this is not logical what you're doing here. That's the only reason that I wake up and then act before I conduct the failure.
That's a very good one. And then which mindset did you acquire once you became a CEO?
Eisenhower matrix. The thing that I learned when I became a CEO or a founder, I'll say a founder is maybe more appropriate than a CEO, is something I've been in high-speed jobs all my career, high-paced environments. But for me, the biggest risk, and I say this to every founder, is that the Eisenhower matrix is pulling you in the wrong direction. And for people that don't know the Eisenhower matrix, so basically it's a prioritization. You have important, not important, and you have non-urgent. And actually, you should never work on non-important, non-urgent. And a lot of founders empathize with me. If you are not hygienic on your to-do, if you don't say no, you are always pulled. Someday you realize you're only doing non-important, non-urgent tasks. And for me, I became ruthless with that. And the people that start at Oper, they can sometimes, I'm very accessible, of course. The people at Oper, they can sometimes be a bit surprised when I say, no, I won't do that. I don't have time for that. I'm not interested. I'm interested that we solve it as a company, but I will not touch my fingers on this.
Cool. I'll start using that more often because the calendars are packed.
The only thing is that I now have everybody in my company using it. So sometimes there are things that don't get solved. And you have to ask the question, is this really not important?
No, that is a good point. If the whole company is not solving it, is it really non-important and non-urgent? Okay, then it's fine. Don't solve it.
Maybe another mindset is communication. Actually, by having things communication, I think there's this great LinkedIn CEO LinkedIn video that he says, if you haven't said it 27 times, you haven't said it. Of course, I listened to it like, yeah, it's true. 3 times will also be enough, but it is true.
Repetition.
And don't get bogged down. Indeed, by now I'm a very happy to repeat things 25 times. But in the beginning, you're like, I said this once, it should be clear, but it is not. It will not be. So repetition.
Cool. And this is a tough one, I think. What's the piece of advice that you wish somebody gave you that now you're like, I need to tell everyone?
Oh, the Eisenhower matrix thing. That's something that I also tell everyone. It's also something I tell everybody. It's actually my most impactful piece of advice. So I hope I can once change that. But it's on founding side, I think it's I see a lot of people using it after I tell it to them. So it's happy to repeat it here.
I think you just merged like the 2 previous questions, communication and the prioritization.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Cool. And then this is my last and favorite question that I ask absolutely everyone. That is, if you were to change one thing in the industry, one thing in fintech that can change that, if you were to change one thing that has the impact that could change the lives of customers, staff, and shareholders, what could that be?
You mean as Oper or just in general?
As an industry.
As an industry, I think we should very quickly come to a global instant payments, instant transaction framework. And I know this is now a technologist answer. I normally don't give these kind of things, but I still think it is crazy that if I want to wire money to somebody in Venezuela or to somebody in South Korea, that I have to go through such a painful journey. And there's a lot of technology that can solve it, but for some reason, I still have to ask you, do you have Revolut? Do you have PayPal? Do you have, no, I don't. It should be as simple as going to www.google.com.
I like that because it is true. It's still painful. And that's the question. Do you have Wise? Do you have Revolut? What do you have? Good one.
And it should be as easy as a URL. And I know blockchain for long has promised to give an answer. And I know that also geopolitical payments are more difficult than internet, although maybe coming back from that one. And I think if we can have, that's the foundation. That could be our LLM moment in fintech for infrastructure.
Cool. Geert, thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing conversation.
It was a pleasure and a lot of fun. Thank you, Monica.
Yes. Thank you, Geert. Everyone, ciao, and see you next week.